Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's installment of A Taste of Techstars Sustainability. Today, we're talking about the role of mentorship and engaging mentors effectively as an entrepreneur. Again, I'm Zach Neese, part of the program team here of the Techstars Sustainability Accelerator in partnership with the Nature Conservancy. Hannah Davis is here too.
Hey, nice to meet everyone. Thanks for being on.
And again, just as a reminder, our program is an accelerator where we bring 10 companies in each year, and we surround them with mentors like you're about to meet. And the goal is to accelerate the business, specifically in the sustainability space. And our partner, the Nature Conservancy, is also a really important aspect of that. They're a great partner that brings a lot of scientists and subject matter experts into the group and really enables some great learnings and progress for the companies we work with. So again, we're really honored to have three amazing mentors with us today that are highly involved with our program. I'd like to turn it over for brief introduction so we can get to know who's with us today. Kathy, do you want to start?
Sure. Hi, I'm Kathy Keating, and I'm a CTO mentor for both Techstars Boulder and Techstars Sustainability. I have gone through the program in Techstars Boulder 2017. As a CTO, I've been in technology all my career, solving really hard problems since years ago when I got out of college. And I've worked across both technology and products, so a lot of the mentorship that I do within the program falls on both aspects of what is it we're trying to build and how do we build it. So that's me.
Great, Kathy. Wendy, would you like to go next?
Sure. Good morning, everyone, and happy St. Patrick's Day. So my name is Wendy Lee, and I have the good fortune to have been involved with Techstars since day one in Boulder, not because I went through the program like Kathy, but because I am an entrepreneur, and at the time I had just been acquired my company by Siebel Systems, and therefore I had some time on my hands to share the learnings I had been able to pick up over a decade of business building, and then a successful transition to working for the large company, the big co as I call them, and was living in Boulder. So my experience mentoring really started back in the first year of Techstars. Now what I do is, it's pretty cool. I've seen a lot of change in entrepreneurship and in Boulder and certainly at Techstars. Now what I do proudly is I serve on boards, both corporate boards and venture-backed boards. I do ecosystem advisory work around the world, some for Techstars, some on my own. And I do some angel investing and a lot of mentoring, especially right now. And that's why I was honored to have Zach and Hannah reach out to me. My experience with the Nature Conservancy is very fresh and very exciting. Last year being my first program, I learned a lot and was inspired in ways I can't describe, and continue to work closely with several of the companies from that cohort, the one for last year. So with that, I'm ready for any questions. I think Ryan's going to introduce himself, and then we'll kind of carry on, right, Zach?
All right, Ryan, you want to go next?
Thanks for the St. Patrick's Day wish. Yes, Ryan is definitely an Irish rooted. I have a background similar to Wendy's in that regard. I got started in mentoring with Techstars in the Boulder program when it started 10 years ago. I've not been through the program, though ran up and started a business in this CTO role at about the same time, and have been involved with the Techstars sustainability program since its inception. So my background, as you might imagine, in CTO land and product land is really focused on a commercial side around product market fit. It tends to be what I tend to spend time with companies, though the questions go across the spectrum, because I've started my own company and run that up into the hundreds of employees. I also have a background in lean and agile, and so lean startups a big part of that product market fit concept, highly reinforced by a lot of the content that Zach and others have published at Techstars in their toolkit. And I've got a strong background in impact. I was one of the founders of Pledge 1% concept. We were one of the first public B Corps in the market, and been involved in other impact accelerators in the Boulder area. My focus now is completely on climate. I do work in venture-backed startups and nonprofits in the area that are working in regenerative ag as well as clean tech. I do some advising in that regard too. So look forward to any questions. I think I'm prepared. I'm feeling lucky. How's that? Because it's
there you go.
And you're in a room that appears to be painted green, so it's.
I know. I have a green sweater. Katie has a green chair. We're all good.
Yeah.
All different shades.
All right, and for those attending, you'll see Hannah in the chat is putting in links to things mentioned. If you have questions or would like to focus on anything specific with one of the mentors here, please add that into the chat or the Q&A. We're monitoring both, and I'll be able to direct that to our three awesome mentors here. A little bit of context for why, again, mentorship is so important. So when we think about the companies that we bring in, about the first month of program is what we call mentor office hours. And that's where we bring about 90 mentors like the three you're interacting with here today, and really surround the companies with a lot of wisdom. And in those initial meetings, because they're pretty quick, it's kind of a high level feedback on the business and high level kind of data points. Then throughout the rest of the program, that narrows down into a team of somewhere between 3 and 7 mentors that are called lead mentors that dedicate at least an hour a week working with the particular company that they're paired up with. And so being able to effectively manage mentors, work with mentors, is critically important to our program. But we also believe this is critically important even if you're not in an accelerator. Entrepreneurship is a brutally hard and incredibly rewarding activity. And being able to leverage the wisdom of those who've done it a time or 2 or 3 or 4 can be really helpful. And so what I wanted to do is, again, give everybody a sense of what are the effective ways to reach out to mentors, engage with mentors, and get the most from those conversations. I also want to acknowledge that we're in some kind of unique times where things are changing pretty quickly. There's clearly going to be, kind of a long-term impact of what's going on now. And that doesn't necessarily mean that just because we're kind of, working from home a lot doesn't mean that business has come to a screeching halt. There's still opportunities and important things to consider when navigating. And I know for pretty much everybody on the call, we've been operated businesses through 2 or 3 of these. So I'm wondering, we'll kind of open it up with this, which is as you think about mentorship and the role that it played during difficult or highly uncertain times, I'd be curious, what stories do you have or what things stand out to you as really powerful interactions that you had with mentors when it felt like, everything was going upside down?
It felt like, and it kind of was at that particular point. I'll start. I think all times are worthy of memory, good and bad, or up and down, a better way to say it with less judgment. I think the story that strikes me the most is one that's an example of connection. And I mean, 2 business people talking about businesses and their businesses. And then there's the spirit of the individual talking to the individual, which is more on the compassion side. And then there's just the sheer curiosity and creativity required to get through it. So the example I have is really when it was 2008. which was not my first business cycle experience, but it was one where I had moved to California from Boulder, and I had fallen in love with the startup. It was not mine, but I'd fallen in love with the startup. And one of the investors from First Round Capital knew that I'd fallen in love with it and was doing his best to describe before I agreed to participate with my own money and my own time that this would be challenging. And this was right when Sequoia had sent out their memo of that era. And of course, I just wouldn't hear it because I had fallen in love with this business. I loved the founders. I loved everything about it. And I was willing to do anything, time or money, to make it happen. I just remember the partner in this firm who, of course, as a result of all of this, we're very, very close friends. Early stage venture capital partner said, let's first talk about the business itself so you understand the assets and the situation you're going to be facing. Not that you see now, but he tried to put me in the future, right? Just a little bit, not too far, to kind of set up the milestones that he imagined I'd have to face. And they were significant, and they all came true, even though I completely denied it all. You know, I was sold, I was passionate, no one could convince me, blah, blah, blah. So just his ability to map out and ensure I was writing it down because I was emotionally involved, that was awesome. Then he talked to me as a human. He says, look, you have a lot of emotion for this. I understand this, but understand this will be difficult, more difficult than you are even imagining. I want you to be ready for that at an emotional level because, you know, it's just you and you're going to throw all your energy at it. That was significant for me, both the business side, the milestones I might face. He wasn't saying I would, but he set it up. He'd been through cycles before. And then the last part, there's the business part, the personal part, the curiosity part, was his unique ability to continue to ask me as a exited entrepreneur, successful entrepreneur, at least in his eyes, to explore my curiosity and my passion for this, to get me to talk out loud about it. So he could pick up signals of fear or concern or naivete or whatever it was. So, you know, the partner's name is Rob Hayes. He's with First Round Capital. And it was a difficult adventure for me. It was not successful, which was hard to take. But that experience of mentorship with him was non-trivial for me. And I've tried to pay that forward to give that first to other entrepreneurs, following that three-legged stool, so to speak, those dimensions.
Thank you so much, Wendy. Brian, Kathy, do you have stories you'd like to share?
Go ahead, Ryan.
Well, I'm going to follow just talking a little bit about what Wendy just did, which was a fantastic example of how mentors engage, right? One with a story, not with opinions. One with a framework in her mind about how to talk about this from multiple dimensions at once, not just a single dimension. How to understand that there's a person involved and how to remove judgment from the system and to try to have this be the entrepreneur's journey, not the mentor's journey through the lens of the entrepreneur or vicariously through the entrepreneur. So that's what I think great mentorship looks like. And that goes no matter what the setting is, because you can create your own existential crises, no problem, as a startup. You don't need
That's right. We do that regularly, don't we? We love that.
You don't need a pandemic to do it to you. So I'd say one of the things that stuck with me in my cycle was a story of once we had been through the public process in our last company, the world kind of changed pretty dramatically for us. And I ended up, usually our CEO is my business partner for 26 years, would do my reviews. And instead I got Jerry Colonna as my reviewer for that year, of which he, as you can imagine, he's probably very different. If you don't know him, he's related into the Techstars world and here in Boulder as a coach and a fantastic coaching team under a company called Reboot. And he was, instead of somebody coaching me on just the sides, the business aspects, it was much more about how I showed up. And it was much more a story about how to be present in a situation that was really kind of really fluid, sometimes called it standing on jello. And in those situations when it's like that, just stopping, pausing, and being present. Have somebody remind you to do that in that kind of setting when it's that chaotic, or not chaotic as much as complex. In a lot of cases, many technology companies may feel a rush of a lot of customers, like I'm sure all the teleconferencing people are. And now they've got a different problem. They don't have a lack of customers. They've got more customers and they know what to do with. And just being able to stop, pause, and be present and check in with people on the emotional side and stop worrying so much about the mechanics of the business in those settings. That was some of the best advice I'd ever gotten. And it came in, as Wendy's did, in the form of many Socratic stories and question and answer.
Thank
Ryan. You, Ryan.
Yeah, so I'm going to take us way back to the dot-com bust in 2001. So I was a newly minted early tech leader at that time, and my company had gone under, just like about, I don't know, close to 50% of tech companies had done. And, people were leaving tech. A lot of people had joined tech recently, and they were leaving tech because they just couldn't find roles. And here I was, a newly minted leader and definitely an introvert. And I was like, okay, is my career over? So my mentor just really sat me down and said, hey, these are the times in struggle when the best companies and the best people are made. And so he really encouraged me to learn how to navigate the fear and allow that for fear to propel me forward into like figuring out, what is it that I wanted to do? How could I add value? And to learn to iterate really quickly. Ryan mentioned lean before. I feel like I applied lean practices to myself to learn how to iterate myself forward, to say, oh, that didn't work. Let me go do this. Let me go do that, to really find my place within the world. And I ended up landing at this pretty small company at the time called Monster, who we all know is the job board today. And I think Monster is a great example of like, hey, let's figure out this hiring thing as we come out of the dot-com bust, right? So these times of high pressure and these times of angst, or when all the issues that people need to be resolved get really pushed into the present, right? They become very present for all of us, right? And as entrepreneurs, that's an opportunity to learn for ourselves how to stay open to where the problems are going to take us to help find solutions, right? And I'm so thankful for my mentor at that time to take me out of the living in fear of I don't know what I'm going to do in my life, to figure out how to be open and available to all the opportunities out there, and to really iterate through them and say, okay, that doesn't work. Let me go here. Let me go there. And I was a part of that, rapid growth of Monster. And I think I attribute it all back to that mentor who said to me, just really feel the fear and do it anyway. And realize that these times of strife are what make us as entrepreneurs. And the other piece of advice he gave me at that time was that when we live in fear of the future, we're creating scenarios in our head that don't actually exist yet, right? And so, but that fear stops us, right? And the advice he really gave me during that time that I live to this day is, I can't control the future. All I can control is how I feel about it today, right? And if I can say, okay, that fear is not going to control me as an entrepreneur. I've founded twice since that time. I'm not going to let that fear control me. I'm just going to say that fear is going to tell me something is working or it isn't, and where is it going to take me next? And kind of get all that judgment and, out of the way so that I can step into that fear. So, and I've lived that piece of advice was probably the best advice I've gotten in my entire career from a mentor.
Thank you so much for sharing those stories. I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about the more tactical side of mentorship and specifically mentor meetings. So I'm curious, what stories do you have of interactions that you've had with mentors or with mentees, entrepreneurs, where that person's really set the two of you up to have an effective meeting or has approached you in a really meaningful way that sets both the entrepreneur and you up to have a really effective conversation?
I can go first. So I think the most effective meetings I've had, and I've mentored now, I think 6 Techstars companies, and I mentor a bunch of other companies as well. I think the thing that I see that sets the conversation up for success is that the entrepreneur really owns the agenda. The entrepreneur knows what questions they're struggling with. And brings those to the table, right? So, and I'm going to switch over to entrepreneurs that I think meetings that are not effectively run is when the entrepreneur is leaning on the mentor to create that agenda, right? Where should I go next is not helpful as much as I have this problem. Let's talk through this. Help me figure out how to, land on an answer. So, I always encourage all the entrepreneurs I work with to remember that they drive the conversation and to be as open and vulnerable and questioning as possible with their mentors.
Yeah, I'll build on what Kathy has just said. I think I do a lot of mentoring for Techstars and for Rise of the Rest, Steve Case's portfolio of companies, and in all these communities that I've worked in for ecosystem development. So oftentimes it is on the phone. More often, like 90% of the time it's on the phone or through, a mechanism like we're doing today. So the 3 things that stand up for me when we're rocking, right? When we're rocking and there's good connection and there's good exchange is number 1, when no assumptions are made. So it's not good I would suggest entrepreneurs don't make assumptions around your mentor. Like you can check in with a quick question, not like how's your day going, but just to snap in so you can be where your mentor is, because your mentor wants to be where you are, right? For sure. So that kind of snap in, what I would call initial part of the conversation, is non-trivial for me, because otherwise I don't feel in flow, right? And so I can't make any assumptions. This is not all about business for me as a mentor, right? It's much bigger than that for me. It's about curiosity and passion and business building and community building. I could go on and on about the real benefits of being a good mentor to me. I don't want to babble that to the entrepreneur, but I need a trigger. I need leadership from the entrepreneur to not make assumptions and to snap us both in place. So that's number 1. Number 2, context for the business is real important. I may or not have had a lot of chance to go on the website. I mean, I've done some preparation. Be assured, if I'm your mentor, I don't show up not prepared, but still things are happening so fast. You are standing on jello. It is fluid. So entrepreneurs need to make sure that context is set. And then to your point, Kathy, specificity is real important. I'm not a therapist. Jerry Colonna is, right? And as much as I some days think I can kind of get in that mind, the truth is I do not have that skill. I'm a business builder and I'm an ecosystem builder, and I have my skills and I have a good brain and a good heart too, but I'm not a therapist. So the more specific the entrepreneur can be relative to the agenda and the things they need to sort out for this call, which is likely 45 minutes to an hour, the better off everyone is. And then the last piece for me is it's not all linear. So this whole notion of an objective and an agenda, which I understand well, be okay as an entrepreneur, and mentors should be too, if you go off piste a little bit, right? I mean, things aren't going to stop just because you go off piste. I think though having good, snapping in, having good context, having an agenda with some specificity, at least keeps you organized, because time is the most precious thing for everyone, not just for the mentor. Much more so for the entrepreneur that's in the fight every day. So I think if we get off the agenda, just to know we have, and to say that to each other, and then at the end to summarize those next steps. I think the hardest thing for me, Zach and Hannah and I have talked about this, is just this kind of open-endedness about it. You know, like, oh, well, you know, we're going to go here and we're going to do that. And that's not helpful for me. Like, because I really I can swirl, but I like to know we're getting to a place where value is exchanged. And if we're not, that we're going to get there the next time. And so that would be my way of explaining an effective call or session with an entrepreneur.
I guess I'll add a little, but I think that was pretty well covered by the other two presenters. I would just add a couple pieces on top of that. And one is, I would describe it as you need to ride the horse you got today. And that is it's in both directions. You really need to understand where both people are at. And if you don't check in, as Wendy and Kathy both said, you don't understand that. And it's you can be, one person can be galloping off in a direction, the other one's not ready to do anything but walk. And so that, and it's challenging. And when you're in a remote setting like this, especially over video, you know, you have to be more conscious of the ceremonies, and you have to be more disciplined, because can't see all the body language, and it's hard to know if they're fidgeting and stuff like that, and if things aren't flowing real well. Wendy's last point of trying to create a thread through the conversation and keep the thread going. Certainly, people, you know, when they show up and throw up, that's really hard to deal with, as Wendy was describing. And sometimes the meetings are like that, because that's really the entrepreneur's head is swimming around, or her head swimming around, and you need to kind of help them settle that down, and that's your job for the day. But understanding in a 13 or 15 week program, there's a lot of stuff to get done along the way, and if we don't keep making progress on those things in a fairly regular rhythm, and we have to keep going backwards and re-looping on stuff, that's really, really hard on the mentor. And so I also expect some kind of a thread through this system, and it's okay to, as Wendy described, to go off piste, especially if the jello's starting to eat you today. Yeah. No
if you're sinking in, don't let me drown.
Yeah, I mean, if we're running short on cash and we're talking about product market fit, for God's sakes, let's talk about cash.
Yeah, right.
Don't sugarcoat these things, and as the other part says, of being vulnerable, of we're not. Yes, we can also be investors, true, but we're here to help you accelerate your business through the program and act more like board members than somebody who's checking up on you and measuring you up on some fashion. It's more about how you go through the whole flow than any one meeting. And if you're not vulnerable in some of these things where you just have to let it all out, it does paint another picture, and that picture is of somebody who really doesn't have personal insight and is guarded for some reason, and that just raises red flags.
Let's continue on kind of in this thread here and talk about things that entrepreneurs do that probably not intentionally, but inadvertently get in the way of effective mentor meetings. Ryan just mentioned a couple there. Wendy, Kathy, what comes to mind for you to kind of add on to what Ryan was just talking about?
I think that just not a self-awareness, in my humble opinion as a professional, is like the most important knowledge of all, the knowledge of self. And sometimes meetings, going back to what Ryan said, you feel like you're really in a groove because there's not the level of candor that is required to solve the problem, right? Whatever the problem of the day is, or to set up the solution to a problem. So I think when it's all too stilted and too make nice, then my red flags go off, because at least in my life of entrepreneurship, it's just really, really messy, mostly all the time. Someone's quit, or you've got a business cycle situation that's making you crazy, or your term sheet's been pulled. I mean, it's always messy. So just me, I'm trying to understand what level of candor we're going to be able to get to, right? And if I can get to that level of candor, then I can do great work for an entrepreneur, because I can be in their head and heart at the same time. Because it's not all intellectual. It's not about a spreadsheet. It's not always about the product roadmap or the funnel. I mean, all those things are elements of business building. But if there's something else that's blocking the solution that we're trying to look for, then I think that's the human element that if we can't see it and understand it, that we don't make progress. And I think some entrepreneurs, if they don't know us, this is the first time they've talked with us, as we have those speed dating things, with the Nature Conservancy and all accelerators. I mean, that's hard, right? Because you're kind of coming in, you only have a few minutes, and everyone's got their candy and their rooms all decked out, and everyone's excited, and as they should be. So even so, you're trying to dive in quickly to a level of candor so you know what you're dealing with in all ways, not just the market we're pursuing or the product we're building, but the human that we're interacting with. So I think that is important and can cause a meeting to not be effective.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll follow along with what both of you said there. Is Ryan, you said something very powerful, is like think of your mentors kind of as your board. And yet mentor meetings are a safe place to practice what it means to work with a board. And so it's that opportunity to say, how do I ground myself in who I am and what's important to me? You're going to have 5 or 7 mentors. They're all going to give you different advice, which is just like a board would do, right? So you're going to get all this advice, but at the same time, you have to come back and you have to ground yourself and say, okay, I've taken in all this advice, and now what direction am I going to move? And your mentors provide this great safe place to be able to do that. And where entrepreneurs often get in the way is they don't see the mentors as that place to practice these skills of being vulnerable, having hard conversations, the candor that Wendy talked about. It's like, this is a playground for you during the Techstars accelerator period to practice all of these skills about how to have these conversations, say the hard thing, and then come back to yourself and ground yourself and say, okay, I'm the CEO or I'm the founder. Which direction are we going to go with all the advice that we've gotten? And I see a lot of entrepreneurs spinning in the whirl of all the information they have and not pulling themselves back to that point of grounding and decision making.
All right, thank you so much for those viewpoints on what works well for a mentor meeting and what gets in the way of an effective mentor meeting. In program, part of the kind of context of the program is setting up these relationships, these interactions between our mentors and the entrepreneurs. because we're talking to entrepreneurs right now, typically that aren't in accelerator programs, I'm curious what works well as far as outreach from an entrepreneur. How should entrepreneurs be thinking about identifying mentors that could be helpful, and then beginning that kind of outreach and relationship building to effectively build a pool of mentors when you're not in an environment like an accelerator program where that's a huge value add of the overall structure of the program?
I will set up because of this is more this is kind of in my ecosystem brain, where if you're in Kentucky or if you're in Missouri or even Ohio, sometimes there aren't accelerators. Techstars is not everywhere, right? Lots of places, but not in those particular cities. And so I think entrepreneurs look 3 different places for mentors. Number one, in a co-working space or a coffee shop or an office, wherever you're going beyond your living room. If you're going out and entrepreneurs want to be with each other, we love that. That connectivity is very important. Asking around with entrepreneurs like yourself in the community, who have you met with, interacted with, connected with that brought value to your business? And then I'd follow that up with, is it financial value? Is it product value? Is it sales and marketing value? Be very specific with that. But I encouraged when I was in Cincinnati for 4 years running that ecosystem, there were not good mentors there. Let's just be honest. There were very sophisticated corporate executives that were wicked smart, relative to their product or their functional expertise, but they weren't good mentors to entrepreneurs because they didn't understand the way entrepreneurs oriented or thought or the challenges they faced. They just didn't. So we had to scurry around and be very agile and nimble about bringing together mentors that would be helpful. And then we built a database around that. And so we had to distinguish between subject matter expertise that might come from Procter & Gamble because of supply chains they have in China from those entrepreneurs that had built a business, be it bootstrapped or venture-backed, that didn't matter to us, and that would offer some kind of experience, share some kind of experience and expertise with our entrepreneurs. So I learned a lot while there about the nature, the quality, the quantity of mentorship. I don't think it's a program you can buy at MIT, with all due respect. They tried to sell us these programs of mentorship to train executives from corporations to be that. And I know that does work sometimes. I know at the Nature Conservancy we have scientists that are excellent mentors because they're functionally brilliant in their areas, right? Which you need that expertise. But when it comes to the experience of entrepreneurship, that can be different. I think that is sometimes hard to teach. So I think reach out, ask others in your community about who they're getting their advice from. That's one. Second thing is sometimes Chamber of Commerce, frankly, have good mentors in certain Midwest. Again, I'm not from the Midwest, but I've been living there. Sometimes the Chamber of Commerce has very good programs set up for mentorship. They really do. So I was turning my nose up at that. When I moved there from San Francisco, the chamber, I didn't even know what a chamber did, for God's sake. But once I discovered how chambers operate in the Midwest, I was completely blown away about the services they can offer, both to Main Street businesses as well as venture-backed, as well as bootstrap technology businesses. So that's a second source. And you should, if you're in a small city, again, not on either coast because it's different there, but I think the chambers can bring a lot of help. And then the third really is down to whatever entities, I call them entrepreneur support organizations. There are usually in any town 2 or 3 or even 4 of those kinds of organizations that are not related to the chamber, and their job is to support entrepreneurs. And that could be a program called SCORE, They're entities like that. Some are nonprofit, some are public-private. But I would say, based on my experience, I mean, Techstars has a load of high-quality, amazing mentors from around the world that have gone through the program or have been affiliated with the program in a city. Techstars entrepreneurs are very, very lucky. Those that are not part of the Techstars network for whatever reason, I want you to be encouraged that those resources do exist. And talk to your peers, talk to your chamber, and look for other entrepreneurial support organizations in your city and your community that are there to bring value so you can grow your business. There you go.
Thanks, Wendy. Kathy, Ryan, what would you like to add?
I'll add a few things. So I think it's important for entrepreneurs to realize, you're not just going to reach out to someone and they're going to be your mentor. You have to realize sometimes that it's a 2 or 3 level introduction that might happen before you land with the mentor. So that having conversations with people on a regular basis is incredibly important. Being out into diverse areas of the community, if you have a tech community in your area, go to a few different meetups or work with a few different organizations to talk to people about what your business is about and say, hey, do you know anyone who might be able to help me talk about this conversation? Mentorship looks like many different forms. It might be a scheduled conversation on a regular basis like you might have with a Techstars mentor, or it might be an ad hoc conversation, 20 minutes with someone and you get incredible information. Look at each person you talk to about what grain can they instill in you, what idea can they instill in you that is a piece of mentorship, right? So it can look in a lot of different ways. It doesn't have to look one way. If you're in an area where there isn't a tech hub or a sustainability hub or other companies of your right? Think about online or virtual scenarios. There's a few really large leadership Slacks that are all virtual. The one I'm thinking about right now is Rand's leadership Slack. That is leaders from all over the world with all different kinds of background, from startup to large company. And those people are trying to get mentorship themselves. And they're also mentors for you as well. So think virtually as well as physically about how you leverage your network to find people. And if you're an introvert, learn how to have conversations. Go ahead,
I guess
Ryan.
2 pieces on the end of that. One that alludes to maybe somewhere we're going to be going, and that is I was a member of YEO, which is now called EO, back in the late 90s, early 2000s. That got me to a place where I felt comfortable starting the business that I did. Those programs, highly structured and super effective, and are available on a fairly wide basis throughout the United States. And so some people call it YPO for Young Presidents Organization. All of that's collapsed into EO. So I'd have a lot of positive to say about finding things through that domain, and the way they teach you how to engage and how you run forum meetings on a monthly basis is effective.
Yes.
Then my last one is just a 100% personal pet peeve, but we've already kind of talked about it, and that is these are two-way conversations that should have value in both directions. Definitely send me an email that says I want to pick your brain. That will get you into the trash can.
Bad expression. Really don't like that expression. Please.
I know exactly what's coming. A one-way conversation of all the things I can do to help you from one end to the other, and nothing in it for me. So
Right.
you can have the words ASAP on the end of that pick your brain piece, and I might even reply to tell you how inappropriate that was.
Yeah.
Right on.
This is a two-way conversation, as Wendy described before. We do this for a lot more reasons than to stoke our egos about the things that we've done in the past. This is about having an impact on the ecosystem that you work in and the communities that you work in, and with disadvantaged portions of the community to move people forward. This is not something we do because we need to hear how great that was.
Mm-mm.
Absolutely. Exactly. We learned so much from you guys.
Yes.
So following on from that, Ryan, do you have an example of an outreach, maybe not by email, but of somebody that was new to you that effectively created that connection?
Yeah, I mean, it happened last week between you and I with a person, and that was a double-blind introduction where the person then wrote something to me that was directed about what, in this case, she was interested in and why that would be interesting to me, and how when the things that she is exploring, that then to me made the conversation potentially super interesting to me in a couple of different ways. That works super well. I mean, you guys train that in the program because it becomes such a part of how to engage with mentors that I've gotten so used to it. When it doesn't happen, it just jars me.
Thanks for that. I'm going to turn to the chat questions here. We've got two that came in. The first one that we talked a little bit about, and there may be some kind of fuzziness or some nuance that can be added, which is around the relationship between mentors and founders, and then when that mentor also wears an investor or a board member hat, how to think about, if it's not just a mentor interested in the domain, but if there's some kind of additional financial implication or power dynamic that's involved with that relationship.
I'll start since we lost Wendy, and just real quick, I think that through the program, those things tend to evolve into that place. And if they evolve in a very authentic way, as both Wendy and Kathy have been talking about, it's a natural conversation. And success through this process means you found somebody who really wants to help you run your business in the long term. And so an investing role or a board member or advisor role is kind of a natural outcome of a good chemistry bond that works between the folks. That's great. I mean, personally, I don't invest in companies that I don't have an intimate stake in time and relationship with because it's just too risky and it's not very fun. So
Right.
I think you should be thinking about it as that's what success looks like, and there's no need to be tripped up by it unless you get everything reversed and you start by saying, hey, I'd really like you on my board and as an investor, as opposed to exploring it through a natural mentorship process first. I think Techstars does a fantastic job of that by soaking you in 90 mentors, having you pick 7, working with 7, and usually out of those 7, you're going to find 2 or 3 people that'll stick around and be part of your investment team too. So I've seen so much success from the way you guys run it that it just seems like, wow, that's the happy path.
Thanks, Ryan.
Great.
Kathy, Wendy, would you like to add anything?
There's nothing I would add. I think that's exactly right.
Yeah, I agree.
Excellent. The other question that came in was around, and Wendy, since you've done such a great couple workshops around sales, I'll aim this one at you first, but Ryan and Kathy, happy to have you join in as well, which is thinking about selling in times like this where it seems like perhaps businesses could freeze and not buy anything for a while. How should entrepreneurs be thinking about, if they're approaching product market fit, have product in the market, adapting to what's going on in the market right now?
Well, at first it would depend on the market that's being served, right? Is it a small business market? Is it a large corporation, large enterprise market? But generally speaking, marketing and selling is all about, good relationships and delivering small increments of value over time with an eye towards then ultimately having more than just an exchange of value, but an ultimate relationship where a product or service is acquired, installed, and value is received. So I would say in these times, this to me, especially this particular scenario that we're in, it's not like their goals, problems, and needs are getting met by anyone else. So the fear of the competition, well, they're cheaper or they have a better feature or any of that crap, I mean, that's not true, because they're not, they're a little bit, I'm talking the enterprise, be it a medium size or a large enterprise, they're stuck. They are paralyzed for a moment in time, and they're at home like you. So this is a unique time, I think, because we're all at home, but we all still have things we're trying to accomplish, challenges we face in accomplishing them, and therefore needs that need to get met over time. So I think if I were in a direct selling mode, it would be different if you were selling through channels or through distributors, or that's a whole different motion. But let's just say direct selling, enterprise selling to a medium to a large organization where they have a decision process and all of that. I would say perfect opportunity to continue to drip feed small modules of value to them over time. You are not selling to them, you are working with them, exchanging value with them, and staying in touch will matter when it comes to them making a decision. Going dark is not awesome. Now, being tactical and say, well, I haven't heard back from you, which I get sometimes, I'm like, well, and what did you expect me to do, right? I mean, so be mindful of the language you're using in reaching out. Be mindful of, again, where you are, where they are, what kind of value they need to be considering. I mean, a great example this morning to this question is I was talking to the governor of a state, and I actually would like this governor to have a partnership with an entity that I'm on the board of. Okay. Well, these are trying times. I mean, this governor has declared a state of emergency, for his state. It's not the state of Colorado, by the way, but it's still in a serious situation, just like everyone else is. And somehow we're on the phone, and I have to be mindful that I'm not asking for an action. I'm just trying to stay in the conversation. That's all. I'm just trying to stay in the conversation. I'm not trying to be pushy. I'm not trying to say, give me a PO, give me a project manager for this partnership. I'm just trying to give that governor and that governor's office food for thought, food for the future, ideas for the future, and let them know I am a resource for that. And I think just had the spirit of that going, everything will work out, maybe better than you even thought, because you'll be able to differentiate through your approach, not through your product necessarily. I'm not saying the product's not good or awesome, but I'm just saying it's through your approach of delivering value and building relationships over a very specific period of time that can matter. I know this for sure. So don't question it. Just do it that way, and I think it'll work out better than you imagined.
Thanks, Wendy.
My point of
Kathy, Ryan, do you have anything to add on that question from one of our attendees?
Yeah, so the thing that comes up for me during this kind of climate is that idea of staying open to what problems need to be solved. So I think often we say our product is this thing, it fits in these verticals, this is what we do. And we get very rigid as we go forward to say, okay, I'm targeting these 3 verticals with this product. And But if you think about what you're really doing is solving a problem for somebody, right? And so when you think about these hard times, is like those problems exist in different ways. The same problem that needs to be solved can exist in different ways. And so I'll use the example. I had this conversation yesterday at my company. We work primarily in the staffing and real estate verticals. We do conversational messaging. And of course, staffing, a lot of companies is on hold, right? But if you think about it, there is a new problem around conversational messaging that has popped up because all these employers out there now have people all over the world that are at their houses and not in the office, right? That they need to reach really fast when they need to reach them. And that's something that those employers have never realized that they needed. Do, right? And so they're struggling with a problem of how do I reach my people? And now our product can flip and talk to the same problem in a different setting, right? So it's an opportunity for you to think out of the box to say, who else is having the same problem that I didn't think about? And how can I apply it in a different way?
Thank you. Got about 4 minutes here, so I'm thinking one last quick question. Kind of a quick question, but potentially hard to answer. But let's see if we can get to kind of 1 minute each, which is there's so many different things that each of you could be doing with your time, and I'm sure you get pulled in so many different directions. Just real quickly, why do you choose to mentor? What is fulfilling about this for you personally? Maybe Ryan, do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, I'll lean in and start. This is, I think you hear it through all three of us a bit. There's some real distinctive competencies in all of us in this regard, and helping teams through these and founders through these tumultuous periods. So it plays to our strengths. I see the attribute of curiousness in all of us, of trying to learn and explore some new pieces and not feel like we're getting that we're closing down in some fashion and just not being open to new things. And so it's a way to be open to new things. And it's also always a journey in your own personal insight and your own personal growth to be able to try and work with people who are completely different than you are, in completely different place and time and of their life, and do it better the next time. And so it's a real thing of personal improvement and continuous improvement, that you get to keep working and doing it better each time. And believe it or not, none of the folks I've ever worked with are the same.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Thanks, Ryan. Wendy, Kathy, what would you like to add?
Yeah, I'll go. So for me, there's two sides to this, and I think we've touched on this, is like, for me, I get filled up when I help someone else, when I see the light bulb go off in their mind, right? And so that fills me up because I love that idea of helping other people, and helping them grow, because I would not be where I am today if someone hadn't stepped in and done that for me. So I really feel strongly in that pay it forward. How can I help the next set of entrepreneurs and leaders in our world? And then for me, myself, every time I have a conversation with someone, I learn something. I get quicker at hearing a challenge and coming up with solutions, and that helps me be better in my job as well. And so I love when, Ryan, you touched on this a little while ago, is like, this is a mutual conversation and we're both learning together. We all have different skills that we bring to the table, and you as entrepreneurs, you teach us so much, and I really appreciate that.
And so for me, my addiction is to the potential of humans and businesses and communities. And it took me a while to realize that addiction. And in the spirit of that addiction, the best place to work on it is in a mentoring capacity, because then you are helping that individual professional achieve their potential. That impacts the business that they have passion and that they are building. And then communities are favorably impacted. So my new thing in life over the last 5 years is economic vibrancy and economic vitality, and the role entrepreneurship and innovation plays in cities and states that don't look like San Francisco or New York, or even Boulder for that matter. So that's the one reason I do it. And then I would say my own personal mantra is you teach most what you need to learn. And that is not an original quote. That's been shared with me, thousands of times over my adult life. And so when you can listen deeply and you have enough context, you can somehow find a moment to teach or share. And generally speaking, that comes back to you and you're learning as well. So I think we've all said that in some form or fashion.
Mm.
Well, Wendy, Kathy, Ryan, I really want to appreciate you for joining us today, and appreciate for all that you do for the entrepreneurs that we work with. So that'll wrap up our session today around mentorship. I'll upload a recording of this for everybody if you'd like to rewatch it. And again, the three of you, thank you so much for everything you do for our program, our entrepreneurs, and for entrepreneurs listening. If you want to interact with 80 people like this, applications are open now for our program.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Zach.
Zach.
Thanks, Techstars, Hannah, Zach. It was an honor to be a part.
Real honor with you two.
Yeah.
Thank you.